All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Role Players. This is episode 8, and will be the season finale up until next semester when we get things rocking and rolling again. For crunch time, we welcome Trey Whiteout and Zach Peay making his Role Players debut.
Yeah, it's nice.
So you make your crunch time return, and then you debut on another show. So you've had a busy day, my friend.
Oh, yeah. It's been a busy day for sure. Well, back and forth from Nashville and everything.
Oh man, that Nashville drive kills me every day. I thought maybe today, because we got in the office a little bit later than usual. We got in at 9:30 instead of 8 because we had our comm luncheon today, holiday luncheon, which was fabulous. For everyone who made food for that, thank you so much. Especially shout out to Paul. His mom made some cheesecake.
I didn't get the cheesecake. I was too late for that.
Well, oh boy, it was the bomb.
Know.
So everyone who made food, thank you so much for that. I had a blast for that. As well, but guys, we'll go right into it with this episode. We're going to talk college football, NFL, a little bit of NBA, and obviously the big one. And Zach and us and me and Trey are foaming at the mouth to get this one going.
This college football one's going to be fun,
no doubt. So we'll start with college football. The championship is set, or at least the playoffs are set. Championship weekend gave us a heck of a weekend and a lot of chaos, as we saw. Number 1 Georgia go down to Nick Saban and Alabama. Washington somehow is the underdog against Oregon, multiple score underdog, and somehow
that did not
somehow
make sense
wins
at all.
Somehow,
right?
And but they get the quote unquote upset over Oregon, even though they didn't have a loss and still don't have a loss to this point. So they get their seat at the table at the playoffs, and then obviously the big story all week has been Florida State gets left out at number 5 despite not losing a single game the whole year. They did win in the ACC championship with the third-string quarterback, mind you. Everyone, of course, saw it. I was at the Titans game at a tailgate when they announced it, and we were all going bonkers.
I had a bye week, so I didn't have to go to any games.
Man.
It was great.
No doubt.
Didn't have to watch a punter's leg get snapped or anything. It was awesome.
Man, that was an exciting game to watch, but also a tough game
with
to
no
watch.
penalty called, too. It's even better to hear about that.
Yeah.
I mean, that one is much more understandable why there wasn't a penalty.
Right,
I don't like it,
right.
But
yeah, he's a ball carrier until he punts it. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally get it.
But the matchups are set. So number 1, Michigan takes on Bama. Number 4, number 2, Washington will take on Texas. So, guys, first, before we get into the real nitty-gritty part of the show,
right.
What are your thoughts on the matchups between 1 and 4 and 2 and 3? Trey, we'll start with you this time. What are your thoughts on the matchups? And who do you think is going to win? Because we'll have a month to talk about this, unfortunately. You know, these guys don't play till New Year's Eve.
I think it's just going to be Michigan and Washington, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
That's your 2 teams.
Well, you guys remember, I don't – college football is not really my thing.
No, I know, I get it.
I think that of all of them, Michigan lost their head coach.
Jim.
I was about to say which Harbaugh was
Jim
it?
Harbaugh.
Jim.
But
twice.
Yeah, they lost.
He was suspended twice this year.
They lost
Sign stealing.
Yeah. They lost Jim Harbaugh. The Washington has been they've just been a good team the entire year.
Yeah,
and
they have.
It's kind of hard to put against them. I get it's Texas and Alabama. They've been on a tear as of recent, but I just see those two teams that haven't won or haven't lost a game yet, and they, especially against good opponents, bad opponents, doesn't matter. They just kept doing their job and won. So.
Okay, that's interesting. I like that take. What are your thoughts, Zach?
Bama playing Michigan.
Yep.
It's SEC football. I mean, the whole reason that SEC is in there is because it's SEC football, right? And I don't think Harbaugh or Michigan, the Wolverines, are going to be able to steal enough signs to stop Nick Saban from being able to beat them, unfortunately. And which, by the way, that is the controversy for all that. It happens.
Yeah.
We all know it happens. If you watch tape, it happens, okay? So the whole we're going to suspend him for stealing signs thing cracked me up all year, especially because they kept winning without him, which was even better than that. They played better without him almost. So I think that's hilarious. So I think Bama's going to walk through Michigan. I don't think it's going to be a trouncing or anything like that. I think it's going to be probably like a 3 to 7 point game type thing, keeping it close. As for, was it
Texas and Washington?
Texas.
All right, Texas and Washington. Oh man, let's see. You know what? I'll say Washington for that one. I will because no offense to the Longhorns, while the Longhorns have a good team and have consistently played good football this season, Washington just seems to be the underdog in every game, even though they've not lost a game. And they deserve to be there. So I think Washington's going to beat Texas.
Was the underdog, pun intended or no?
Think about it.
Yeah. No. Listen. I think that Michigan and Bama is going to be close.
Yeah.
I think that Bama will end up winning. I think it will be close because I will say this: I think Michigan has the most rounded team in college football, like just top to bottom. Like their roster's like on par with a potential NFL team. But then you look at Bama. I mean, Jalen Milroe is almost playing himself into the conversation for Heisman.
Man,
the guy is playing lights out ever since he got benched against USF.
And yelled at.
Yep.
Don't forget that Nick Saban yelling.
Got yelled at. I mean, but everybody gets yelled at. Nick Saban. No matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you were Julio, King Henry.
You could hear Tua's conversations about that, too.
Yeah, no doubt. So I think it's going to be close, but I think Bama's going to end up getting the win. Granted, we'll talk about this for a month, so it kind of stinks on that end. And then Texas and Washington. I understand that Washington they're a really good football team. They got, obviously, the Heisman hopeful in Michael Penix. But I just think that they want to run the ball in order to really kind of make him comfortable. And Texas, that's the one thing that
stout run defense
you are not going to do against Texas because they got a 360-pounder in there. They got a 315-pounder in there in the middle that are both probably, if not first, second-round picks for sure. One of them is going to be a first-round pick. Again, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's 360 pounds and moves like a gazelle.
Yeah.
He's going to be a first-round pick.
About. Yeah, he'll be a first-round.
He's
a
sure. Monster.
Top 5 probably.
He's like Jordan Davis reincarnated.
Oh man.
He's huge. I remember watching that Bama Texas game. I was like, "Good Lord, that is a massive human being
huge.
That moves well."
Yeah.
It's not like he's slow. He's got great agility. He's got great side-to-side movement, and he will move people.
I know the combine always sucks to look at because combine doesn't always tell how good players will be. But I am interested to see how he sizes up in the combine stuff for the NFL when he declares for the draft.
He's going
to see what he does.
He's going to eat the kickers that show up.
Oh my gosh, he will.
He's going to eat the special teamers, the few special teamers that are like, "Yeah, I'll show up and run a 40 time."
Yeah, I got you, man.
Just for gigs, he'll eat them. But I see Texas winning out. And granted, selfishly, I want a rematch between Texas and Bama. Selfishly.
Yeah, but remember how Nick Saban works. If you beat him during the regular season and you play him again for a second time, Saban usually wins those second games.
And that's kind of why I want them to rematch.
If Bama goes in and wins this whole championship off of the default of getting in other than FSU, which I know we're going to talk about in a second, if Bama wins this whole thing, it has to have an asterisk next to it. Because the question mark is what happens if Florida State had made it in?
See, and we'll talk about it in a minute, but it's kind of what people talked about last year with Georgia because TCU got in. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
But TCU got in over Bama, and many people agreed that Bama was the better team, including myself, but TCU was the most deserving team.
Yeah, Bama's not as good as they were last year.
Right, but TCU beats Michigan, so they get a little bit of credibility, and then they just get dog-walked against the Bulldogs, which I think most teams would have.
Pun intended?
Pun intended. 100% pun intended. But, yeah, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But I agree that Bama's different. I think that they finally embraced that Jalen Milroe is not your typical pocket passer. He can do it.
Yeah.
He's
Saban evolved his game? What?
He does it,
man.
Never
happens.
Hey, he went from giving King Henry the ball 25 times a game to letting Tua throw it 50 times a game. So
You're absolutely right. He did do that.
He was like, "All right, guys, we got to throw it more than 12 times a game," and then it worked. So
to be fair, when you've got a big guy like Henry in the back there, you kind of have to give it to him.
Nice catch there.
Yeah.
You almost did it.
Yeah.
You almost went to it. A nice catch.
Yeah.
But all right, so let's get into the crux of this thing.
I can't say much about Henry right now, man.
Well, he's still somehow top.
I don't get it.
7 in the league in rushing. Somehow, I don't know how.
He's second in the league in rushing behind one of the worst blocking offensive lines in football right now.
Don't get me started on Tennessee right now.
We'll talk about that.
I watched that London game against the Ravens. I can't.
Yeah, we'll talk about that here in a minute. But I was at the game this past Sunday, and again, the fact that he's somehow second in the league in rushing shows you how great of a running back he is, despite having a terrible O-line. But
should have traded him.
Okay, let's get into the FSU debate. Because that's going to be the main.
Oh yeah. No, this is going to be great.
We're probably going to hit this for about 10 minutes. So
that's fine.
The NFL and NBA bits are going to be like 2 minutes long because I want to talk about this. And I have a resume sheet for you guys.
Yep.
We're not going to talk about everything, but let's take a look at the resume for the 3 teams that people argued for not getting in or getting in. The first one being Bama. Main thing is 4 top 25 wins. Big one was Georgia, right? They beat LSU, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Georgia all within the top 25. Georgia was number 1 at the time. And this was interesting. Bama's record or their opponent's record, excuse me, for the season, the ones they beat were 98-56.
Wow.
Which means they have almost a 2-1 win record, who
Yeah.
their opponents were. So I think that was probably a big proponent why Bama should have gotten in.
Right.
And I
Well,
want
and
to
the extra top 25 win.
no doubt. So I want to make it clear. I thought Bama should have been in from the jump. I didn't think there was a scenario in which Bama didn't get in. But the next two are the ones that were a little controversial in my opinion.
The moment they beat Georgia, that was
Yeah,
the
they beat number
moment
one
they-
Georgia. They should be going in.
No doubt. And I think we're all in agreement there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next one,
Absolutely.
the next two was where we're going to disagree. So we first look at Texas. 3 top 25 wins. Number 25, Kansas State. Number 20, Oklahoma State. And number 4, Bama. Their best one being obviously Bama on the road.
Right.
Their opponents
Early in the season too.
early in the season. Their opponents finished 81-65. So maybe not quite as good as Alabama, but you're still double-digit win over loss in terms of your opponents. Their worst opponents were Baylor, Houston, BYU, and TCU, and really all of those except the BYU game were close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, Baylor.
That Baylor game
I think
was
Baylor,
tight.
You know, Houston was close, right? Houston came back and almost beat them. TCU was close. You know, obviously the former team in the playoff kind of falling off,
Right.
you know, a little bit.
Happens.
Texas, interesting, did not play an FCS opponent. Bama did. They played Chattanooga, which, you know, happened to go in the second round of the FCS playoffs, but we won't talk about that. And then the last team obviously being the big one, Florida State, 3 top 25 wins. LSU, Clemson, and Louisville. LSU obviously being first game of the season, Clemson being on the road, and Louisville being the ACC championship. This is where I think people have kind of alluded to their strength schedule not being as great.
Yep.
Their
That's been the number one argument.
opponents finished 77-79, so
I-
slightly under 500,
I-
which genuinely surprised me overall. I'm not gonna lie.
Best one was 13 LSU, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
My thought on that is that especially when people bring up the strength of schedule at the end of the year.
Yeah.
It's like, how are you supposed to know that some of these teams would be like as bad as they were? Like
Absolutely
you
correct, man.
scheduled-
You were right.
You scheduled every single one of these teams and expected them, at least most of them, to at least do well enough, and all of a sudden, some of these teams just fall flat on their face. They don't do as well
And
all
I
the
think-
rest of the season.
and I think that's something-
why it's just frustrating as a whole.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's a good point you bring up, because I think to me the strength of record is almost more important, because again,
That's
it's-
where I would say.
You know, the
and
strength-
and how many top 25 wins you got?
the strength of schedule is almost like a little bit, like you said, it's kind of screwy in the fact that you don't know until the end of the year, so you
Right.
can't really make a strength of schedule.
A good example, not with college, but with NFL, hell, or even with baseball if we go to it. For
Right.
the NFL, who would have saw the Giants being the worst team in the NFC East, going at 4-8, 4-9 right
Yeah.
now, while the Dolphins or the Ravens, for example, because people thought the Bengals would be over them at this
Yeah.
point.
We thought
they're
that Joe
much
Cool
better.
would be killing us right now, but
Yeah.
unfortunately Joey Cool couldn't hold on to a football. Unfortunately.
Yeah, and then if you're going
Well,
by
that's what happens when you break your wrist.
Well, you
Yeah.
know, it's hard for me to be happy about it. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I hate the injury, but as a Ravens fan, man.
then when you're going by, like, for example, baseball, Padres, one of the teams that was all built up and all that, you expected them to do well. The Mets, you expected to do well.
and then
All
both
of a
of them
sudden, they're
tanked.
both tanked. But a team like, for example, the Orioles, who immediately weren't built like the same star power as that of the Mets
Thought
and
we
the
were only going to win
Padres.
64 games.
Yeah, and they end up winning over 100. So you do
102,
not
I
know
think?
how. Yeah, 102.
Yeah.
No, I think it was more because I think the Dodgers had 100 plus, but I think it was like 108, 109, something around there. But
I'll double check.
But
That's a
yeah,
good question.
just
As an O's fan, I should know this.
but just
haven't
in
won 100
general,
games
you
in
do
forever.
not know immediately how all these teams are going to do.
no.
So you schedule them, you make them, you predict them all to be better or worse depending on how they started or how they look like before the year. And seeing a team fall flat on its face versus a team that ended
Ascended.
up, ascended all of a sudden. It's just a really screwy way to like really look at teams.
No doubt. And I mean, you take a look at their worst opponents. North Alabama 3-8
101.
FCS
Oh, okay.
FCS
Really?
team.
I thought they had
Wake
the best
Forest.
record.
101 and 61 losses.
Oh, all right.
I got you.
Sorry.
Southern Miss. No, you're good. Southern Miss 3-9. Wake Forest 4-8, and then Florida 5-7. No one predicted Florida to be that
No,
bad.
nobody
No.
predicted the Gators to be awful.
But so this is my thought, okay? Because again, I think the strength of record was surprising to me for Florida State. I thought their opponents were a little bit better
Yeah.
than they're what they were. But it's still, you're about right 500, right? I mean, they talked about how you had 4 bowl teams. So teams like Duke that aren't ranked, teams like that aren't necessarily ranked, but they're going to go to a bowl game.
Oh, yeah.
They had 4 wins over that. They have 3 top 25 wins. Because this is my opinion. And no one's talked about this, so I guess I'm kind of wrong in this. I thought it should have been Michigan, Washington, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bama,
Michigan and Washington are in for sure.
Bama, I thought was a no-brainer.
As soon as they beat Georgia, it was a no-brainer.
And then I thought Florida State should have slid in at number 4 or even number 3, but probably number 4. And I thought Texas should have been left out.
I think Bama's rightfully ranked at 4 because of the overall record.
Right.
But I think you're right. Florida State should have come in at 3rd. I don't think Texas should be in this lineup because of the people they've played. Don't get me wrong. Texas beat Bama. So what you're hoping for is the Texas-Bama matchup, right? Mm-hmm. That's what you're hoping for because it's going to create great television, and ESPN makes 150. They make 150 million more dollars because they got Alabama in compared to putting FSU in, right? But at the end of the day, look at the schedules. You've got 3 top 25 wins for Texas, right?
Yep.
3 top 25 wins for Florida.
Yep.
Then the 3 top 25 wins for Florida are 13 LSU, which also Bama beat at 13.
Yep.
So you're putting Bama in because they beat 13 LSU, right?
Yep.
They got 4 top 25 wins. If we just go off top 25 wins and who they beat, you got LSU at 13, Clemson at 22, and Louisville at 15.
Yep.
The people that Texas beat are 25, 20, and 4.
Yep.
I get it that 4 is a big deal, but come on.
So,
you can't give credit to 25 Kansas State.
No doubt.
And Oklahoma State. No offense to the Sooners. Or is that not Sooners? Sorry.
No, well, they lost to the Sooners.
They lost to the Sooners.
That's their one loss.
Yeah, that's their one loss, yeah.
And that's something that
no offense to Oklahoma State, but Oklahoma State it's a 20 to 15 team half the time.
And that's something that I argued in favor for Bama because Bama's loss is much better than Oklahoma.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Their loss is to, okay, you lost it at home, but you lost to a top 5 team at worst in Texas, whereas if you're Texas, granted, it's a rivalry game. It's one of the biggest rivalry games in all of college football, and Oklahoma's not a slap.
No, they're not. They should have been better this year.
They're 10-2, right? But Texas's loss is worse than Alabama's, and then you're looking at Florida State going, hey, I don't care if you got a third-string quarterback. They still won all their games.
And it's the opponent. And then you talk about the third-string quarterback. The second-string guy was coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He was only missing the championship game. That's all he missed.
You basically told Florida State you're not getting in because your
he got
quarterback got injured. That's pretty much what you said.
So here's my question for you guys, since nobody's asked this question yet, but between the three of us.
Sorry, not towards you.
No. I know. Trust me. No, I get it. Your anger's not towards me. It's towards the committee. I trust me. We all have anger towards the committee. I've had anger for them for a while now because they want to prove an expanded playoff. Is this the final time to the nail in the coffin, the proverbial coffin or whatever, to say, hey, let's stop doing 4 playoff teams and let's start doing 6 to 8?
Well, they're doing 12 next year.
Are they doing 12 next year?
Well,
they need to. They need to. Because this right here shows that the 4-team playoff bracket thing that we've been doing the last few years officially is crap.
Well,
that's what this is.
But the thing is that saved the committee for years, and I've talked about this before, is they've almost never had this issue.
Yeah.
TCU got screwed out a couple years ago when Trevon Boykin was there. And
Florida State was undefeated one year, didn't another year, right?
Yes,
and did they get in?
No, they got in. Yeah, they got in.
I think
you're thinking of Auburn, who got screwed out of the BCS era.
That's what it is.
That's what you're thinking
sorry.
about.
My brain was like, there was another team that had a similar instance like this.
Yeah, it was Auburn.
Here's something from reporter Kelsey Riggs. I don't know if you. So she puts few final CFP thoughts on the college football live. When multiple teams deserve a spot, why is Week 2 valued more than an entire body of work? FSU should have been in over Texas, not Alabama. The one criteria from the committee that a team cannot control is injuries. You control wins, head-to-head, who you schedule, winning your conference. FSU controlled everything they could. Bama didn't, Georgia didn't, Texas didn't. Yet the committee chose to value an uncontrollable factor more than a team that delivered on everything that was presented before them.
I think it's great
then
words.
The best teams find a way to win, no matter what. That's why they deserve to be in. The best and most deserving team is way more similar than y'all think. And I think as a whole, that's probably the best thing. Like you're basically saying that it doesn't matter as much if you win all your games.
Right.
It matters if you make it look like it was more convincing. And it's like, what why should it matter if your team wins? Like,
I don't remember.
Undefeated. It's just
No doubt.
I don't remember who it was on ESPN that said this, but he used NFL as an example. He said, all right, if the regular season of college football doesn't truly matter.
Greeny.
Greeny, yeah, okay. That's what I was trying to figure out what his name
yeah.
was. He's like, if it doesn't matter, then let's get a committee of old coaches together for the NFL, major name coaches. He started listing off all these big name coaches, and he goes, let's put them all in a room and have them choose the top 16 or player or teams for NFL, and then put them in the playoffs.
Yeah.
He's like, if that's how college football is going to go, let's do that for NFL. Here's my thought. If FSU doesn't announce that dude's hurt, does FSU get in?
Well, I think that they're going to know that he's hurt because if he's not playing.
Still,
but if they don't announce that he's
Florida
out for the year.
State was like, hey, he's sitting this game because we know we can win this game, yada, 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 right? If that happened, or if he doesn't play the North Alabama game where he got hurt at, right? Then does Florida State get in? Are they a lock if this guy doesn't get injured? Is that really the argument right now that we have?
See, and this is one thing I got frustrated with because Booger McFarland kind of went in on this. He was one of the guys that kind of went against the grain, and I respect him for that. But he talked about, but he kind of went at Bama because he just said, well, they needed a miracle to win at Auburn.
They didn't need to win a miracle.
Guess what? Well, they did to beat Auburn. They needed a fourth and 20.
Oh, okay. Sorry, my fault. I'm misunderstanding which game you were.
But you're talking about
my fault.
Teams that needed a miracle. I mean, you're looking at Texas. Look at their win loss. I mean, Baylor was not as close as I thought. They beat Kansas pretty well, but they only beat Houston by 7. They took overtime to beat Kansas State, which is barely in the top 25. They only beat TCU by 3, right? They beat Iowa State by 10, and then their last 2 weeks they beat Texas Tech pretty good and Oklahoma State. I don't care what people say about Bama barely beating. They beat Arkansas close. They beat Ole Miss close. They beat Auburn close.
Yep.
I don't care what people say about you beating them close. Guess what? You won.
A win's a win.
At the end
whether
of the
it's
day,
dirty or not, it's a win.
I don't care if you beat a team by 100. I don't care if you beat a team by half a point. A win is a win. And I understand that Jordan Travis makes Florida State less of a team.
Right.
Because he doesn't play for them. I think the main reason why they did this, and I don't think this is that controversial.
They wanted an SEC team in?
They wanted an SEC team
for
sure.
It's one of the most major conferences in college football. It is the conference.
But they didn't want a situation where somehow, some way, Florida State upsets who they would have in the round 1, probably Bama.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or even Michigan, because they would probably been 4, okay?
So you think that they're guaranteeing Bama going to the championship with that Michigan game then, huh?
No, it's not a guarantee, but what I'm saying is they didn't want what happened last year, right? So, because what did we talk about earlier in the show?
I just found one of the things that Greeny said. He said, basically, what you're doing for this is you made football become figure skating.
Yeah, you did. You
put a judge in and said, yeah, we can determine who did it best.
Here's my question to both of you guys. We looked at the rundown, right, of this.
Yeah.
Look at the opponents finished. Texas has 81-65 record against their opponents, right?
Yep.
Their opponents have a much more winning record, right?
Yep.
FSU's is 77-79.
Yep.
Why is that not mentioned in anyone's argument so far this year? For this instance, no one I don't think anybody on ESPN talked about the opponent's strength or anything like. I mean, they talked about strength of schedule, but they didn't talk about how the opponents finished. You put this down in the rundown. So my question for you is, how is that not a defining factor? If that's a defining factor, then I obviously can see why Texas makes it in.
Then why?
But that's the only reason why I could see that.
Why is it emphasized that they don't have Jordan Travis? Because this is what I was getting to was I think they didn't want a situation like last year where TCU quote unquote deserved to get in, but Bama was better.
Yeah.
Same situation. Florida State deserved to get in, but they thought Texas obviously
was better.
is better, so it's going to make it a better game. They don't want a 65-7.
Think about the fandom too.
They don't want a 65-7 game again. They do not want that again because everybody turned it off at halftime because they're like, oh, okay, Georgia won, great, let's watch something else. They don't want that.
Turn
again.
it back on during the celebration.
Did you say that Alabama or Texas was a better team than Florida State?
No, I'm saying in terms of that's the argument, right?
The argument is that they're
that Texas
better
is
teams.
better because they have their starting quarterback. Florida State does not, even though Florida State is undefeated. That's the argument that I'm saying.
I think as a whole, they went back to exactly how they did it last year. They left the better team as a whole out of the playoffs and put in a team that's not really as good. And
see, I disagree.
Now,
I disagree with that because I think last year they put in the 4 most deserving because that's the way it's been for the entire year. And we'll end with this note. So I'm sorry to cut us off. We got to end with this note so we can get to the NFL at least. We're probably going to cut out NBA to be perfectly honest.
That's fine.
But the whole time of the playoffs, it's been the 4 most deserving.
Yeah.
And as of recently of last year, TCU was not the better team than Alabama.
No.
But they were the most deserving because they played in the conference championship game. They lost, but played in their conference championship. Bama lost 2 games by very close, right?
Right.
Then they switched it up to this year.
I
Instead
would-
of going with the 4 most deserving, they went with the 4 best.
I would argue that Florida State was more deserving because.
And I agree. And I agree with with that argument.
Can I ask a question to both of you real quick before we skip over?
Yeah.
Should Florida State boycott their bowl game? That's the only question I want to ask. Should
think
Florida
yes.
State boycott their bowl game?
I think yes, and the reason I'll say it real quick is because someone needs to fall on the sword to say that we don't need the NCAA. All they do is get in
Yeah.
people's way.
Yep.
Especially a big conference like the ACC, the SEC. They need to separate from the NCAA and say we're going to do our own thing because all you guys do is muddy up the water. We want to take care of it on the field. You guys get in the way.
I think if you play the game, you put like third string guys in.
Right.
As just a big like, hey, thanks for letting us in, but we're going to put all the people in you didn't want us to play anyways.
Imagine if that actually happens and they beat Georgia with those
that'd be
strings. That would be
Well, they might
best
have to.
thing
They
in the
might have to
world.
do it anyway if they play because I'm assuming a lot of guys who are NFL guys are going to be like, well, screw this.
Yeah, we're not playing this game.
I'm playing. I'm going to go.
I'd
to
play the college playoffs, but I'm not. I'm going to go to the draft. Why would I hurt myself before the
Yeah,
combine?
right.
And
Yeah.
there's a lot of NFL talent on both Georgia
There
and
is.
Florida
There's
State.
a lot of NFL talent.
But,
Okay.
to answer-
But
to
on to
answer-
the. Go ahead.
I
Sorry.
say
my
to
fault.
answer your question real
Yep.
quick, I'm not sure. I think no matter what, they're going to boycott it.
yeah.
Like I would
Well,
honestly be.
If not
shocked.
them, the fan base
Yeah,
will.
I would honestly be shocked if either the fan base or the team does not boycott the game in general.
Well,
because
and last thought
it's
is
just a slap to the face to Florida State.
Oh, absolutely.
As a
La-
whole. It
last
basically
thought-
saying,
Seminoles
yeah,
should be mad.
Yeah.
no doubt. Last thought is if I'm Mike Norvell, I sit down with my leadership council. I give the players the vote. Whatever the vote is, I'm taking to my president and AD and saying this
Yep.
is what we're doing.
Absolutely.
And
And
if you
not
want-
taking anything else for
If
an
you
answer.
want to fine me or even fire me, go
Go for
ahead.
it.
But somebody's got to fall on the sword for this.
Yep.
Hence, we move on.
Oh yeah, no worries.
We could talk about this for 2 hours.
Oh, dude, we could. That's a whole segment for a show.
We're gonna skip NBA. Sorry, Paige.
Go Grizzlies.
Sorry, Trey, for the graphics.
That's all I
know,
gotta say.
I know
Go
you worked
Grizzlies.
hard on them.
Well, those were only pictures, so it's fine.
But we'll skim over the NFL real quick. Obviously, the big ones last week: Cowboys winning on Thursday night. The Patriots lose as they give up a goose egg to the Chargers, and then the playoffs are right around the corner. And the other big one is San Fran beating
those.
42-19 over the Eagles. That's a big one
Yeah.
last week. So let's get into the
Kind of
matchups.
like that third one. I just couldn't think of anything.
I like
Yeah,
that.
no,
I like that
no
a lot,
doubt,
man. Good job.
That was a good one. So this week
I love
we
NFL.
we have a
so good.
snoozer tonight. Patriots and Steelers.
Who's winning?
Steelers because they'll
Steelers.
With a
score
backup
the team.
quarterback? In Pickett hurt?
they'll score 6. And that's
I'm
apparently
pretty
that's all you
That's all you need.
That's
against
all you need to beat
Patriots.
the
I'm pretty
Patriots.
sure the Patriots are starting their third string
It's Billy
quarterback.
Zapp, right? Isn't it Zappy coming in?
I think they brought in that the undrafted guy.
They're not
to
starting
be-
Cunningham. There's no way.
There's no way they're driving.
And if
No.
they do, the NFL will just cut the broadcast. They'll be like, "Sorry guys, we're not
Amazon's
showing."
just done with it. They're
Yeah.
like, we're
They'll-
sorry.
They'll
Just
turn
cuts it off.
They'll turn it to figure skating.
No doubt. And then a big one this week: the Bucks and Falcons, as both of those are currently tied for the number 1 seed in the NFC South. Even though every single team in the NFC South has a losing record.
Oh, it's so
And
bad
the
this year.
I love how
trying to
everyone
end-
talks smack about the AFC South, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's the worst conference in football."
No,
and
it's
then you
not.
look, and you got 3 teams with a winning record. The fourth one, granted 4-8, but still,
Sure.
The AFC is clearly stronger than the NFC.
No doubt.
There,
Yeah.
it's clearly an issue.
It's very top heavy for the NFC and
yeah, you got the
very-
Eagles and the
More
Cowboys
of
and
course,
the
who
49ers.
expected some of the things to happen this year for injuries and all
Yeah.
that too?
That's
There's
true.
a lot of things that have happened this
I mean,
year that
how
have
many
made some
starting-
problems.
How many starting quarterbacks got hurt? You got Trevor
We've
Lawrence. you
had
got
over
Joe
8
Burrow.
different quarterbacks that have started their first game this season, 8 or
Got it.
9, I think. That
It
have
set
made
the
their
rookies.
first debut.
It set the record for the rookies.
Yeah, it did
amount.
set the rookies. So I know that.
Yeah, when I saw Trevor Lawrence go down the other night, I was like, "Oh, great! Now you can't even. It's
By
gonna
the
be
way,
2-hand touch for the
I
quarterback."
don't know if it's Colin that did it. I think it was Colin that did it. That complained about the Jags not getting him a cart. He did not want a cart. He's on interview stating, Lawrence stated, "I did not want a cart to get me off of that field. I wanted to walk off that field with help." Because that's the guy he is. He's been playing through injury all season. So, like, that's just the guy he is.
And it is, I don't want to say only, but it is a ankle sprain. It's not what we
Yeah,
thought. It
it's
looked
not what we
way
thought.
worse on
We thought he had snapped something. you
Yeah,
know?
I thought his ankle broke.
Yeah.
But
So,
it's only an ankle sprain. So hopefully he'll be back.
He'll be back.
I'm a Titans fan, but I don't want anyone to get hurt. And then last thing we'll say before we get out of here is obviously the big one this week is Eagles, Cowboys. One word, who do you take in that game?
Eagles.
Yeah, Eagles.
Eagles? I'm taking Cowboys.
Jalen Hurts.
Listen,
All
my,
the Cowboys fans at
I
home
can't
are mad at
believe
me,
my dad's
including
gonna
Jeff
see,
Matthews.
my dad's gonna see this episode and he's gonna be like, "Oh, you took my Cowboys, huh?" I'm gonna be like, "I know, I can't believe I said that."
Oh, so that's the reason why you took him.
No, trust me, I
Oh,
love to
God.
get jab at my dad anytime I can. But we got to get out of here. So Zach, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having
Trey,
me.
obviously, thank you for all that you do. Merry Christmas again.
Yeah.
We won't be back till after the holidays. Again, shout out to Steve Sawyer, Doc V, and David Ellison for making the show run. Paige Hearn and Isabella Christensen. So we will see you guys next semester. It's been Role Players. We'll see you next semester. Peace.